Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 20 of MSP Business School. Time is starting to fly by, guys. I can't believe we've done 20 of these already.
Yeah, I'm kidding.
With me, as always, I've got Robb Rogers and Tim McNeil from OSR Manage. And today's episode is going to be a little different. We've just gotten done with a few interviews with some folks. And today we kind of want to share some of our observations that we found from that and some interesting things that we think we don't want to, we want to make sure that the MSP community recognizes and we don't gloss over as we're learning things from these different MSP partners that we speak to. So, we've had a couple people really talking about hooking the whale, right? And trying to find that large account. Guys, there were some interesting stats I saw on that. I don't know what your thoughts were, but, kind of hit me with some of your big takeaways.
Sure. Go ahead, Tim.
I think one takeaway that I had specifically from Craig, I think he was the first guest that we had, was just the length of time it can take to bring that whale in, right? I think one issue that MSP owners historically have is they don't necessarily have the amount of time needed that they can dedicate to hooking in that whale, right? So I think it was, and Black's tip as well. There were two lessons, in my opinion, there were two really important lessons on, hey, you want that whale, you got to put some time into it, right? And also hold that prospect accountable, because if you're doing all the work and the prospect is just kind of sitting there being like, yeah, do this, yeah, do that, and they're not doing anything, you probably have somebody that you're just in the hamster wheel with. So that was definitely one takeaway that I had.
Robb, your thoughts on that subject?
I liked the whole whale approach, but the thing that I thought that even got him there was his complete and utter focus on the ideal 250, right? He made his entire investment into that.
Had to say it.
I had to get that in for us today.
We're 3 minutes in.
And he's a business owner that doesn't have a salesperson. So instead of just relying on referrals or, like finding somebody and them saying that they got this new marketing idea or, like shifting from thing to thing to thing, he sat right on his ideal 250. He makes the investment into that, and then that's how he grows his business. I thought that was really important, to get himself to the stage of the whales. He was able to, do that laser focus on the one thing that he was going to go after. And I think that showed his success.
Yeah, well, I think you've really touched upon two things. If you're going to go after enterprise sales or larger scale sales, you've really got to be focused on that. And it's not something you can just enter into lightly based on that time parameters. Like, Tim, as you were talking, I think I remember Matt saying it was about 80 hours, Craig saying about 100 hours of pre-sales work to do this. So you got to be ready to make that commitment of both time, sacrifice of money, and also have enough going on in your business already to sustain chasing those whales. I know when I've instructed some salespeople in my life, I always said, you got to keep it 80-20. You got to be going after 80 minnows, 20% whales. That way you're eating every day on the way to the big prize, right? Yeah. And then, the other thing I think that was really illustrated through this process too is, as and you touched upon it, Tim, is really that accountability piece. You got to gauge very early in that 100-hour cycle how serious this customer is about you, right? Because you can still put in that 100 hours, but if you're not getting that commitment back and you're just giving them proposals and revising proposals and not really getting the feedback you need to make a decision, you're being exercised. You're being exercised against somebody else, and you got to recognize that. So, those are kind of my thoughts in terms of, the big game. But anybody else have anything else they want to discuss before we move on to some other topics?
Yeah, I think just one real quick thing. I happen to talk with Craig every once in a while offline as well, and I can tell you that the one thing that we didn't get into during that podcast was it's something that you just alluded to, right? The minnows. You don't ignore the smaller ones. In fact, you sometimes put more of an emphasis on the smaller ones, knowing that, hey, those whales, like you're we used to call them grand slams when Robb and I were in the MSP industry. The owner of the MSP that we worked at was very baseball centric, and every metaphor was baseball focused, right? So singles and doubles kept the lights on. Triples, home runs, and grand slams is how you grow, right? So it's just making sure that, hey, if you're going to go after the whale, I'm totally fine. You should do that, but make sure that you're not forgetting about the people who keep the lights on as well.
No, absolutely true. Anything closing for you, Rob, on the concept of enterprise big game hunting?
No, I mean, that pretty much covers it. Like he's got a pretty easy message to sell, right? When he's going in, going after those, and focusing on that. The way that he focused on those 250 that he liked to go after was his messaging. And this kind of brings me to our next point here. His messaging was all around, I don't care about ticket levels. I only care about solving the issue. You call into us and we're going to find the person that is the best fit to solve that issue, not the person that is next in line for a level 2 ticket, right? And the thing I want to talk to you guys about is, what do you think of that, right? There's some pros and cons there, right? Somebody calls in and, they immediately just go to, oh, John knows how to solve that the best. Let's give it to John. Well, what if John, has, 15 other tickets he's working on? So, I mean, what do you guys think of his approach to, like, although it's a great selling message and I was like, wow, that's a great way to, talk to people about it. I mean, in practice, like, what do you think on the operations side? Like, how does that work? And it seems like a big matzo ball there.
I don't know. In my personal opinion, I think you got to be at a certain level of scale before you can consider that anyway, right? Because you got to have the right skill sets in place, but I still think you got to have that level 1 first line of defense that's there to pick up just the average problem, right? Now, if those guys could be blocking and tackling those average problems, then that affords you the opportunity to then hit things to skills-based people, because they shouldn't be, as you said, Rob, under 15 tickets at that stage, right? They may be juggling 1 or 2, but then they can look at priority and severity as a guide on how to accomplish that. What I did like about it, though, is if you can get the tickets in the right people's hands, you should get a faster resolution. If those people know how to work their vendor escalations, because it's what they do every day, each day, every day, it should improve vendor relations. And also the vendor is going to be confident that when this guy calls up, that they know what they're talking about and they've already taken the first 10 preliminary steps, right? So there's certainly some advantages to it. But again, I think that falls into that mid-life span, upper tier type MSP. And it's certainly not something some of the, early stage shops can probably adhere to right out of the box.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
I agree with that, but, what about the client experience? Right? I mean, if you're just going to the person that solves, how can every single one of your 15, 20 IT people know the client with a great customer, service type of relationship? It seems more like a mill. Now, granted, he's very successful. I'm not knocking him. We're just trying to, understand it and delve into it better. But it just seems like you lose a little bit of, like, you have the potential to lose client experience.
Yeah, some of that personal touch.
Well, I'm going to counterpoint that, right? I never liked having all 15 of my people knowing every account, because nobody, if you got 100 accounts that you're servicing, you can't expect everybody to know 100 accounts, right? Exactly. So, in essence, he's kind of expanding on what we used to call the pod process, right? So we used to have a couple frontline level 1 guys, a level 2, and then a level 3 engineer. And that level 3 engineer might span 3 or 4 pods, so be responsible for 50 accounts, but they don't have to be intimate with those 50 accounts like the level 1s and even the level 2 might need to be. So, what we didn't expand on, obviously, with Craig is, hey, how do these guys engage with the customer? Do they know them well? While they're skills based, how many customers is he servicing? We certainly can't argue with one of the things that he shared with us is his average first response time is 8 to 12 minutes. But one thing we didn't ask him is, what is his resolution time, right? When you talk about customer experience, it could be a great customer experience because their problem's getting solved. It could be a horrible customer experience if they have to wait 3 hours for that guy to free up, like you're referring to, right? Yeah. So, there's definitely pros and cons in that model. I've always been a fan of the pod model, like I just said, because it allows you to scale and it allows you to look at a budget perspective, how you're going to need to expand those teams as well.
Yeah, I believe in the pod model as well.
I agree with that.
Like, Brian, like, if you were to go back into the MSP game, would this type of triage system work for you, or would you? I mean, because it's probably the best selling message I've heard.
Yeah, but if I was to go back in the MSP game, I would almost be thinking of it totally differently, not to digress, but I would be going in from a sales and project management and executive leadership position. And I'd be outsourcing to best of breed partners to handle all the commodity driven tasks. So, I'm almost a believer in some respects in that agent model as you move forward, where you've got, and people are doing hybrids of this already today. You've got your outsourced level one help desk, right? You've got people that are watching the monitoring that way. And then you're hiring higher level skills people, maybe like, what Craig's referring to here, the people that can really take that level 2 problem, and then people to maintain the customer relationship, because you can overcome everything if you've got the proper customer relationship. But I'm not going to jump on that bandwagon. Y'all know that's my mantra anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, kind of like with networks with Tommy, with that high customer interaction and high customer touch, like bringing in those jackets and having jackets on his customer site, so he like has the same look.
That was one of the best. That was one of the better ideas I've heard in a long time.
Yeah, he's taking that customer experience almost to the next level. You can see that he's really strongly investing into those customer relationships. And, it goes back to the old saying, you got to spend some money to make some money as well. So,
what a great, what was the jacket? $50 tops. And I mean, now we're talking about it, other people are talking about it, it works at the client site. One of the things that, Eric at CW Now said was that and I think somebody else said it as well, was the peer groups. And when do you get into those peer groups? And, that for Tim and I, we didn't get into the peer group until year 4 in our business. And, I agree with Eric, man. I wish we would have done it sooner.
Oh my God. Are you kidding?
I wish we would have done it sooner.
We were way too smart for ourselves to get into a peer group. We knew it all. Right?
Yeah.
And then you get in a peer group and you realize that you really don't know nearly as much as you thought you did. And that peer group is really good at pointing that out. So.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, I mean,
Brian, what do you think about that?
Well, I'll say this right now. I'm itching to get back into a peer group. We're in our 18th month of really live, go live with VCIO Toolbox. And now it's time to really get out there and start refining the process. I miss the peer group interaction. I'm, to your guys' point, I used to always say is that the one thing I've realized as I've gotten more mature in my career, every day I get stupider. And what I mean by that is every day you start seeing what you thought looked like this, and it just keeps getting wider, right? That's why I always get a kick out of junior techs that tell me in their interviews how they know everything, right? And I'm like, you don't even know what you don't know yet. That's the problem.
Right.
But what I love
like
about
kids.
Yeah, but what I love about peer groups is just the fact that it's not that you're necessarily taking so much things it's not what you don't know. It's those little things that come up that are golden nuggets that you can quickly implement and get fast wins and be able to report back on. And that's where the peer groups are great. Business at its core is business, right? We all got to do that, but it's those little things that spark interest. And I always go back to customer experience. It's usually things like that come out of peer group, right? It's not how to better your accounting. It's not necessarily how to streamline your process. Yes, there might be little parts of streamlining your process that tightens your controls on things, but really it all comes back to how are you serving your customer and can you serve them better, right? And that's what I really hear from these peer groups. You talk about what Tommy's talking about. That's just making the customer feel like you're part of their team, right? Yeah. When you talk about buying people lunch and buying people dinner, to get to know them better, it's allowing you to foster a relationship that you wouldn't get at the desk. You know what I mean? And I'm a big believer in that, type of selling. I'm going nuts because we can't do it during COVID. That's the one thing I miss about, human interaction. We had planned to do an East Coast tour to see our customers this week and do just that, make sure we took each one out to dinner and got to know them better. We were probably going to spend more than they spend in 2 months subscription just on dinner, but it's invaluable,
Yeah.
You have a client for life when you start doing that. And just to add one thing to the peer group, the peer group discussion, I know there's, ConnectWise has its own peer group. There's multiple ones out there that are MSP focused, and I think that's important. But I will say that Rob and I are in a generalist peer group, and I've been surprised at I don't know, not that there are sales focused peer groups that we know of necessarily, but I got to say, having a general peer group, I have found to be more valuable than sitting in a room full of salespeople who all have the same ideas and the same points of view. And my only point with that is for the MSPs out there who are looking to get into a peer group, just there's a lot of really, really good peer groups that are only for MSPs. But sometimes you get in a room and everybody's thinking the same thing, and you start talking about it and it gains momentum, and you don't get that outside perspective of somebody who is from another industry saying, well, wait a minute, why are you doing that again? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Because again, like, they're MSP focused. And I would say that's probably the most valuable thing that Rob and I have been able to take away from our peer group, is things that we think are a great idea. Other people look at it and they're just like, well, yeah, okay, but what if you did it this way? And that's been really, really good for us personally.
I think what you're talking about there, Tim, is you're really with business owners too. So people have a little bit different mindset.
Well, yes.
Business ownership is humbling, right? So when people have gone through some of the ups and downs of business ownership, they're more apt to learn, and then they look at things from a different lens, right? Mm-hmm. Salespeople, I love salespeople. I am a salesperson at the end of the day, but we can get a little wound up into what we think is right and need to stand and defend on that turf forever, right? Instead of taking a step back and going, maybe I'm not right and maybe I should try something a little bit different.
That's only partially true. That's not always true.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, if I was an MSP, I don't know which way I would go. To be honest with you, I don't know if I'd go to, one of the MSP peer groups or go to the ones that are completely outside of the, completely outside. I mean, both of them hold you accountable. Yeah. And the good thing about it is you have other same level type people pushing back on you and not yesing you. Right. So, I like that. I don't know. I mean, would you say a smaller MSP should stay in the industry and a larger MSP should go outside, or?
To me, it's less about the industry piece and it's more about what you're going there for, right? There's nothing wrong with a sales peer group. If you're a junior salesperson and you can get into some sort of program that has peer group with it, think of like a Sandler program, and you can get around people that are having those sales, as well as I do in those meetings, you find people that overcame objectives and they come out of it a little bit differently. The thing is, the topic's very myopic. It's strictly about selling the customer, right? When you get into the more business owner focused MSP groups, now you're talking about things with like-minded people that are, about the problems we're all facing. Because even though we all operate a little differently, we run kind of the same way. When you get into the generalist ones, like you guys are in, where you've got some people from different walks of life, if I'm correct, that's awesome, because then you get some perspectives that aren't so, focused just on the MSP solution, right? And that's where, I know a couple guys that are business owners, they tend to be in two business groups. They tend to be in an outside business group and an inside the industry business group too. So they get their industry needs on one side, but they make sure they're kind of putting a checks and balance with it. And of course, those outside groups can help grow your business too, right? Where you're
well, and that was kind of my overall point with that was, like what you just said, Brian. You get a bunch of MSP owners in a room and they're all swimming in the same direction. You put them in a generalist peer group of different owners in different industries. It gets a little more real. The question of why comes up more is what I would say, right? So why would you do that? Why do you do this? Why do you do that? Why does that make sense to you? And then it forces them, the MSP owner, to verbalize why it makes sense. And as you're talking, you may realize that, wow, maybe that doesn't make sense. And that's where I think it's really invaluable.
And it eliminates some of the vendor bashing too, right? It comes on more to the MSP group, and we fall into that category.
Yeah.
Well, guys, we're running near the end of our time for today, but I think, it was good to catch up with a couple of the conversations that we had and bring out some of the big strong points for our listeners. We're going to be doing this each week. Not each week. After we do 4 or 5 interviews, we'll just kind of recap some of the big takeaways that we got. So, we can summarize for you what we think you need to really focus on. And, we look forward to seeing you next week. Check us out at mspbusinessschool.com. You can also visit us anywhere that you can download your podcasts. And with that, I say, Tim, Rob, have yourselves a wonderful week.
You too, sir.
Yeah.
All right.
All
Take
right.
care.
We'll chat soon. Take care.